It's Saturday morning, and you're 7 years old, and you already knew. You're already up. You've been up since 6 because nothing in the world was going to make you sleep through this. You pour yourself a bowl of cereal, whichever one had a toy in the bottom of the box, and you plant yourself in front of the TV. The cartoons start. And then Boris and Natasha appear on the screen. You didn't know what the Cold War was. You couldn't have explained espionage or geopolitical tension, but you knew instantly, completely, without anyone telling you, that these two were the bad guys. And you knew that what they were doing was wrong. How'd you know that? You were 7. This is Anchor and Caduceus, and we're finding the extraordinary in the ordinary. Today, I want to go back to Saturday morning cartoons and ask a question that turns out to be a lot harder than it looks. Where did that knowing come from? Those of us who grew up in the 60s and 70s had a relationship with Saturday morning that younger generations genuinely can't replicate. It was appointment television before anyone called it that. You planned your whole week around it. You knew the schedule. You had favorites, and you had ones you'd watch if nothing better was on. And you watched them alone or with a sibling, without a parent filtering the content or explaining the themes. The cartoons talked to you directly, and they assumed you could handle what they were saying. Now, Rocky and Bullwinkle was genuinely sophisticated. The humor was layered. Jokes for children on the surface, jokes for adults underneath that you wouldn't get until you were 30. Boris Badenov and Natasha Fatal were parodies of Cold War paranoia, bumbling agents of a fictional dictatorship called Pennsylvania. The show was satirizing geopolitical anxiety, and somehow it also worked perfectly for a 7-year-old eating Fruit Loops. Here's what I want to focus on. Not the sophistication, the simplicity underneath it. You knew Boris and Natasha were wrong immediately, without explanation. Now take it one step further. Dudley Do-Right ran in the same programming block. If Rocky and Bullwinkle was sophisticated satire, Dudley Do-Right was something much older and more basic. Pure archetype. Snidely Whiplash twirled his mustache. He tied Nell to the railroad tracks. He cackled. No backstory, no motivation, no complexity. He wasn't a spy with a mission or a villain with a rationale. He was just the villain. Evil distilled to its simplest form. And a 5-year-old watching him knew that immediately. Not just knew he was the bad guy in the story, knew that what he was doing was wrong. Knew that Nell didn't deserve it. Knew that Dudley was right to stop him. You felt something. You call it indignation or call it a sense of injustice. Something was happening before they had any of those words. Nobody taught them that. Nobody sat down with a 5-year-old and explained the ethics of tying someone to railroad tracks. They just knew. So where did that knowing come from? There are really only a few possible answers, and none of them are simple. One answer is that we learned it from parents, from culture, from the accumulated moral instruction of childhood. We were taught what's right and wrong, and the cartoons were just reinforcing it. But I don't think that fully explains it. Children who have received very little moral instruction still recoil from injustice. A toddler who has never been taught the word fair will still protest when a sibling gets more. The response seems to arrive before the teaching does. Another answer is evolution. Human beings develop moral intuitions because groups that cooperated and punished cheaters outsurvived groups that didn't. The sense of indignation you felt watching Snidely Whiplash is just a very old survival mechanism dressed up in animation. Now, that's a serious answer. A lot of smart people believe it. But it has a problem. Evolution can explain why we feel something. It can't explain why what we feel is right. If moral intuitions are just survival mechanisms, then right and wrong are just whatever helped our ancestors reproduce, which means Snidely Whiplash isn't actually wrong. He's just doing something that doesn't help the species. And most of us don't believe that, including most people who think they do. A third answer is that the knowing came from somewhere else, that human beings are wired with something. Call it conscience, call it moral sense, call it whatever you're comfortable with, that precedes both culture and evolution and points towards something real. I'm not going to tell you which answer is correct, but I want you to notice that you can't shake the question because you know Snidely Whiplash was wrong. You've always known it, and knowing feels like it means something. Now, I would never tie you to the railroad track just to get you to subscribe. But if this conversation is making you think, how about hopping on that horse named Horse and doing the right thing? Seriously, subscribe. New episodes every 2 weeks. Now, here's what I think those Saturday morning cartoons were doing, whether they knew it or not. They were giving us a moral vocabulary before we had moral language, letting us practice the experience of right and wrong in a safe, consequence-free environment. We felt indignation at Snidely, felt relief when Dudley saved Nell, and satisfaction when Boris and Natasha's plans collapsed. And all of that was real moral experience happening in a child's nervous system. We were being formed without knowing we were being formed. Now, those cartoons didn't explain anything. No moral lessons at the end of each episode with a helpful summary. They just showed you the thing and let you feel it. And that's actually a more sophisticated approach to moral formation than a lecture. You don't learn what justice feels like by having someone explain justice to you. You learn it by feeling injustice and recognizing it for what it is. Snidely Whiplash taught you more about ethics than you probably realize. Those instincts are still in you. The ones you developed watching cartoons on a Saturday morning, eating cereal out of a box with a toy at the bottom. The sense that some things are wrong regardless of who benefits. That fairness matters even when it's inconvenient. That the person tying someone to the railroad tracks is the villain, even if they have a perfectly rational explanation. Those instincts get complicated as we get older. Life adds nuance and context and competing interests and situations where the right answer isn't obvious. Now, that's real and worth taking seriously, but those early instincts are worth checking in with occasionally before the rationalization starts, before the complexity kicks in. That first reaction, the one a 7-year-old has before they've learned to talk themselves out of it, is sometimes the clearest signal you have. You already knew. You might still. Saturday morning. Cereal with a toy in the bottom of the box. Boris and Natasha on the screen. You knew. You were 7 years old and you knew. The question is, where did that knowing come from? Some of the answers aren't quite big enough to hold it, but I think there's one that is. And I think that's worth thinking about. I'm glad you're here. Let's keep finding the extraordinary in the ordinary together. And I'll see you on the next watch.